With the mains examination approaching, all of you would be in the final stages of preparation. Nervousness, in fact, anxiety, would be something that you all would be experiencing. But please realize something: it is not only you, and it is not something very unique. It is this particular phase of the examination that you have to be excited about. Because in the next few hours, you shall be appearing for the biggest examination that the country has to throw at you. And here, I stand before you to give you some final tips so that your exam day goes as per the plan, and in fact, your performance is slightly better than average. So basically, for the mains examination, you shall be appearing for multiple different papers: essay paper, GS paper, optional paper, and so on. While all of you know the basics of having a fast writing speed, all of you would have already worked upon that. All of you would have already worked upon preparation of some of the basic framework for certain keywords like the national commissions, landslides in geography, the case of conservation efforts in environment, and so on. Now, these five tips are going to help you maximize your performance at the day of the exam. Now, we will start with the biggest and come to the minor portion later on. So, the first paper that you shall be appearing for is the essay paper. Now, this is where majority of the candidates they start faltering. Now, in essay paper, as a candidate, you are expected to write two essays, one for each sections. Now, what majority of the candidates they commit a mistake in, that they over invest in the first essay. You have to understand both the essays have the equal weightage, 125 marks each. So it is not about how much time you spend only in the first essay. Please do not overindulge, please do not over invest, and please do not write the best possible only in the first essay. Because out of 3 hours, many candidates will spend 2 hours in the first essay and they will be left with only 1 hour in the second essay. Don't do that. Have a proper time distribution of the essay paper. That is 90 minutes each for each of the essay. And you have those 90 minutes. In those 90 minutes, please divide your time. Do not start writing without your brainstorming work or the rough work. Now, this brainstorming has to be done for around 7 to 9 minutes, where you prepare the rough work of what you are going to write, how you are going to frame it, and do that. After that, you start writing, and then take your own good time. At least around 50 to 60 minutes will be consumed, and it is not much, because once you have developed the structure, in the structure itself, in the brainstorming part only, think about the examples that you have to give. Okay, so then write the essay, and then also spend around 5 to 7 minutes to revise, in order to chalk out, in order to eliminate the grammatical errors, for example, that you might have committed, in order to remove or strike down the repetitions that you might have committed, underlining and highlighting the important phrase that you want the evaluator to notice and read. So, for that, 5 to 7 minutes have to be spent. But this 5 to 7 minutes, spend it at the end, once you are done writing with both the essays. Now, in the essay paper, also one particular portion which is very time consuming for the candidates is finding the perfect quotation or finding a perfect anecdote from where to start the essay. And that is where they spend a lot of time. Please do not overindulge in this also. The moment you feel that you do not recall any particular quotation relevant to that area, immediately move ahead. Go for a direct introduction. If, let's suppose, and what do I mean by direct introduction? Start explaining the keywords. Okay, understanding the expansion of the keywords, the vertical expansion and the horizontal expansion that we have already talked about of the essay topics, how to expand them, expand those keywords, use the various different perspectives for each of those keywords, and start to elaborate the essay first in the rough work. Now, what you can do based upon past few patterns and past few years patterns is have certain historical anecdotes. For example, the life story of when we talk about Gautam Buddha, okay? Then, for example, Ashoka. Then, for example, Mahatma Gandhi, right? Or the case of India's freedom movement. Then the case of framing of constitution. Now, why I'm saying this is because in multiple different types of essays, you will find some of the keywords such as truth, wisdom, etc., being mentioned directly or implicitly. Now, in that particular case, you can use the framework that you have already prepared about Buddha's own path to enlightenment, then the stories from the Jatakas, any of those stories, if you have, it will form a perfect anecdotal introduction. Do not, do not be completely based only on the quotation. Do not do that. Okay? Now, when we talk about the GS papers, this is where again, GS paper, when we talk about GS paper 1, GS paper 2, 3, 4, now they happen in such a quick manner, right? Morning, afternoon, again next day, morning and afternoon. Candidates don't get time to analyze and think about the mistakes that they have done. So that is why one mistake keeps on getting cascaded and it magnifies into multiple other mistakes as well. Now, one thing that you have to understand is that there is no perfect answer. I know that we live in a world where everybody circulates model answers and everybody tells you the stories of how model answers should be written and so on. But out there in the exam hall, out there when the pressure of time is against you, nobody is going to be able to write all the points of any particular answer. Why am I telling you that? Again, so that in the first few questions, you should not invest too much of time thinking, I will write the best possible answer, I will gain the maximum amount of marks. You have 10 questions of 10 marker and then 10 questions of 15 marker. Right? 15 marker will obviously occupy a greater time and word space. Accordingly, your effort has to be to get done with 10 marker as soon as possible. And it is where you have to use the diagrams. Remind yourself before the exam hall that any kind of diagram which comes to my mind, I will draw it out. Don't leave a page blank. Now, when we say a perfect answer, that is where, when we talk about, let's suppose, the introduction. Now, many of the candidates spend a lot of time thinking about what the ideal introduction should be. Will I be able to start the answer with a kind of a quotation based introduction or so on? No, please do not think about it. Start directly. If it is not striking your mind immediately, start directly. Directly addressing the main keyword or the key phrase of the question that will frame your introduction. Don't repeat the question. That, for example, what are these policies? These policies are, no, don't do that. That makes your answer appear quite amateurish and quite childish. So that is why address the main keyword of the answer, of the question, and that is how you can start the answer writing there itself. Okay, so that is where there is no perfect answer. Whatever comes to your mind, now is the time to revise and start thinking about how to write. Now, when you have started to write the answer, let's suppose this is the page, the answer page that you have. Now, please have the space distribution in such a way that your answer should not have 5 sentences crammed into the final lines. Nobody is going to read them. The evaluator mostly will ignore it, and you will also create a wrong image in terms of the perception that you will have in the minds of the evaluator. It is better to have a proper space management. And if, let's suppose, you have to fit in something like this, better to leave that sentence. Okay, you might not be missing that much amount of marks out of it. So that is where, please write these answers as quickly as possible. Do not leave any blank spaces in the answer copy. Any point which comes to your mind, you have to write. But leaving a blank space in the answer copy is the ultimate cardinal sin that you can commit when you appear for the mains exam. Then there has to be a balance between the answers. What do I mean by that? So basically, out of the 20 questions, please do not have the expectation that you will know all these 20 questions perfectly well. That is not going to happen. Okay, so mentally prepare yourself that out of these 20 questions, maybe 13, or if you are having a good day, maybe 14. 13 questions, 12 to 13 questions, you will know perfectly well. You will be able to recall what you have studied for those 13 questions. These will be the high scoring areas. Then you will have 3 to 4 questions which are dicey. You know some part of it, but do not know the exact and absolute detail. Okay, and then you will also find 2 to 3 questions where you do not have much clue, right? Now, as I told you, you don't have to leave any space blank. That should not be the case. So here, do not try to have only the scoring in the 13 questions, that I've spent all my time in answering these 13 questions. No, because let's suppose, as you know all the points of this answer, let's suppose you have written a normal answer as per your standard. Now you would be able to write almost 80% of the points that you had recalled. Now thereby you will be scoring somewhere around, let's suppose out of a 15 marker question, you will be scoring somewhere around, on an average answer, maybe 6, or a above average answer, because you know it perfectly well, you might be scoring 6 marks. If you overindulge, if you overinvest, what will be your marks? 7.5 or 7, right? So you are creating a delta of 1 to 1.5 marks. Maybe in 5 to 6 questions you have created this delta. So overall the delta is somewhere around 7 to 7.5 marks if you have over invested and overindulged in these answers. But what this will result into is that you will have very limited space for those questions that you know partially. 3 to 4 questions that you know partially. And you will end up leaving a lot of space blank, and you will not be able to attempt these 2 to 3 questions. Rather than that, write slightly above average answers in this. And then basically, in these cases, of those 3 to 4 questions, write everything that you can think about that topic. You might know the not know the exact answer, but write everything, every data point, every government scheme that you retain out of that topic. So if you were to score, let's suppose, a 3 marker, your marks might increase to 4 marks. That will create a delta point. And then these 2 to 3 questions, write the basic framework. Now, what is the basic framework that I'm talking about? You don't have to leave any space blank. So, for example, when we talk about, let's suppose, in geography, you have the questions associated with urban mobility, you have the questions associated with freight corridors, you have the questions associated with landslides, the monsoons, etc. Now you have the basic idea, the basic template ready, right? Now, if let's suppose there is a slight variation in the question, or slightly different aspects of which region of Himalayas experience the portion of these landslides, write the generic portion that you know, even if you don't know the specifics. Okay, if let's suppose there was a question about all the volcanic eruptions which occurred in 2021, now obviously a candidate might not be able to retain all the volcanic eruptions. The generic ones, Iceland would have experienced a volcanic eruption, right? The Pacific Ring of Fire would have experienced a volcanic eruption. Jot those down and start talking about the reason why the volcanic eruptions they do occur. Draw those schematic diagrams. So the basic framework for each subject, have that in your mind, and that should be used in these non-doable questions, so that rather than 0, it is better to score at least 3 to 4 marks. So in 3 questions, if you create a delta of 3 to 4 marks each, you are looking at a marks advantage overall of 9 to 10 marks, plus here around 5 to 7 marks. So that will give you a winning edge. So that basic framework is very, very important. This is about the writing aspect. Okay, please remember, after you have written the answer, please ensure that you underline only those portions that you want the evaluator to read. Please do not underline the entire sentences. No, you might have written the best answer out there in the world, but only the key phrases should be underlined. Now, then coming to slightly minor areas where we also end up spending a lot of energy, that is the exam center concern and the exam center hygiene. Now, if you have the exam center, let's suppose in a known place, fair enough. But oftentimes, UPSC for the mains exam gives you a center in a very far away place as well. Please ensure that you leave very early so that you are there at the exam hall at least 1 hour before the exam starts. Why am I telling you this? Is because you need to have that mental preparation. You need to be very, very calm before you open up the answer paper. Because at that point of time, you don't have enough time to have that catching the breath and then going through and browsing through the questions and then thinking about it and then to start writing. You will miss out the questions in that case. So, if required, do visit the exam center beforehand. But if it is not possible for you to visit the exam center beforehand, at least get a very good idea about whether you will take the cab or the metro or which transportation you would be using. And please ensure that you reach before time. Sleep early the day before, if possible, if you have the sleep cycle which doesn't elude you. So, this is very, very important. And also be prepared for the worst in the case of the exam center, in the sense of what? You might have the desks and the tables at a particularly low height. Okay. All of you are adults. So, chances are that basically one of your legs will be pushed out, etc. Don't get over impacted by this. Okay. So that is where be prepared that I will not get the best quality seat. I have to write the paper. So that in those 3 hours, you should not have the problem associated. Okay. So that is the exam center concern. Have a good pen, a gel pen or a ballpoint pen, whichever is comfortable for you, whichever allows you to write easily well, so that you don't have to beg, borrow, and steal these kind of things at the exam center itself. Get that in handy, keep that to yourself one day before. And then between the GS papers. Now, what to do between the GS papers? The 2 to 3 hours of time that you have. Now, in that particular time window, now many of the candidates, they start opening the books and they revise the entirety of the book. Now, if you have your topic based notes, just look at those, some of the topic based notes if required. Otherwise, I would ask you, relax. Because after paper 1, paper 2 is also of equally same weightage of marks. Your battle is won only after you have appeared on the all the papers and optional papers as well. So before that, you don't have time to overthink about what you have done in paper 1, what you have done in essay. So between the GS papers, relax. If you have the template for some of the basic areas that we have talked about, if you have prepared some of the key pointers, if not, even now you can prepare some of the factoids associated with, for example, the doctor to population ratio as recommended by WHO, 1 is to 1 is to 1000, then the judges to under trial ratio, then when we talk about the literacy rates, the case of the total fertility rates, these the outcomes of the National Family Health Survey 6, these particular areas have that basic analysis, okay, in one piece of paper. Just look at those particular factoids and then go into the exam hall. Now, at the end of it all these are basically meant to solve one problem, that is anxiety in the exam hall. You should not be anxious. You have prepared enough. You are already at a particular stage of preparation. That is why, out of the 5.5 to 6 lakh candidates who appeared for the prelims, you are the guys who are appearing for the mains examination. Have confidence in yourself and go out there and deliver your best. Do not think what the result will be. This is your time. This is those 3 hours that you have on each and every day where you can prove yourself, where all the information and the knowledge that you have burdened yourself with. Now is the time to show. So you will get those opportunities. UPSC will give you that opportunity. But at the end of the day, just remember one thing. Whenever you start feeling very anxious, it is at the end of it just another exam for just another job. Do not create a larger monster out of this exam. Take it lightly, you will perform well. All the best and do well. Thank you.